Hello, and welcome back to Analog Slop, where two music industry lifers revisit the enemy and melody maker of their youth, which in our case is the 90s. We're exploring artists we discovered as wide-eyed teenagers, only to disown as sneering 20-somethings. Now, unshackled from our hipster baggage, we dive deep into the pre-digital age to look back on a time when music news came but once a week. My name is Graham Best. I've worked in music publishing and music tech for over 20 years.
And my name is Adam Bushell. I've been a music supervisor for 20 years.
Each week, one of us will read the NME, one of us will read the Melody Maker, and we will pick out the most interesting stories and discuss them.
Join us this week for part one of our two-part look at the enemy and Melody Maker from the 14th of September 1991. This week, we explore Billy Bragg's sexuality, and De La Soul bring the Daisy Age to a close, and with it, any questions of their sexuality.
Welcome back to Analog Slot. This is the second issue in a row where we will be debuting a new year to our coverage. In fact, I believe this gives us a full 90s house now. It is 1991, and specifically this week we will be looking at the 14th of September, 1991. I have the Melody Maker this week, so Adam will be riding shotgun with the enemy. And in Melody Maker land, the front cover is an up-close dual headshot of Bernard Summer and Johnny Marr, with the headline, "The Shocking Truth, Marr and Summer Get Charged by Electronic," which doesn't really make sense.
What is the shocking truth?
You know what? Not a lot. Like, they're not particularly kind of like emotive interviewees.
No.
To be clear up front, I decided not to cover this, but I do find it really interesting, like in kind of contemporary reporting of it, in that everyone seems a bit sort of cool on the idea that like the guy from Joy Division and New Order and the guy from the Smiths have like got together.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, it's really strange. You're right. It's all very muted. When you think this would be the biggest thing that ever happened.
Yeah, and even with the like, I think some of the singles are fantastic.
Yeah, they are.
The overall vibe is kind of like, yep, solid 7 out of 10, lads.
Yeah.
Keep it moving.
Yeah.
Anyway, supporting Manchester's finest on the cover, we have Billy Bragg with a smaller thumbnail and the headline, "Wake Up, It's Billy Bragg," which implies a degree of home invasion, perhaps. And resting on Summer's forehead on the cover, I hasten to add, is the headline, "Nirvana Taking the Bliss," along with a tiny top right headline of Morrissey tour and single. There's third string headline shout outs to our old friends House of Love, The Levelers, Thin White Rope, and then bottom of the front page bill are Revolver, Mannix, Teenage Fan Club, Chapter House, and Flowered Up. News Roundup is in the spirit of what we've seen before. It's the early 90s information avalanche in full effect. So, in quick order, Morrissey is releasing My Love Life as a single and touring venues the likes of Hammersmith Odeon and Bournemouth Leisure Centre. REM are busy with a compilation of their early material for IRS Records, due to appear on MCA. They won 6 awards at the MTV Video Awards, with Michael Stipe getting up to accept the awards wearing a different slogan T-shirt for each award presentation. So we get, in no particular order, Wear a Condom, Freedom to Vote, Alternative Energy Now, Choice, Handgun Control, Love Knows No Colors, and Rainforest. That's 7 T-shirts and 6 awards. So I think he was wearing them on top of each other and pulling them off as he went.
Also worth mentioning, all the problems have been solved that those T-shirts were.
Yeah. None of those issues are relevant in 2026. We can all agree. Stipe's account backed up this idea that he was wearing all the T-shirts at once. His version is that he wore them all on top of each other and just removed a layer every time REM won another award, but he did not expect to win so many awards. So you get a slow, principled, sexless striptease for MTV viewers there.
And a freezing Michael Stipe.
Yeah, he caught a terrible cold as a result. The last bit of REM news out of this hat trick, and I mean, to be fair, like, I'm being sniffy about there being so much REM, but they must be one of, if not the biggest alternative band in the world in September 1991. is their contribution to a new tribute album to Leonard Cohen with a version of First We Take Manhattan. That tribute album, however, is most notable for hosting John Cale's version of Alleluia, which will be the version Jeff Buckley uses as a template for his own cover, and which we must now all live with for eternity. Elsewhere, U2 are readying a new single, The Fly, which is going to be the first from a new album provisionally titled Actung Baby. 12-year-old me will go fucking nuts for it. And Prince is following up the Get Off single of the previous month with Cream, both taken from the forthcoming Diamonds and Pearls album. Like, 12-year-old me has had a pretty mind-blowing run of radio singles there.
Yeah.
Also releasing a single is a band called Hole with their debut 7-inch Teenage Whore, trailing their imminent album Pretty on the Inside. Elsewhere, Billy Bragg announces a new album with co-writes from Johnny Marr and Peter Buck, and an early stage Stereolab have a new EP on the way, possibly titled Super Electric. The Melody Maker don't say. Finally, Skid Row have been banned from Wembley venues after breaching an agreement with Wembley Council to either not swear or not incite moshing. The piece is a bit unclear as to exactly what was agreed. Suffice to say, the imminent release of Nirvana's Nevermind will make a ban from Wembley Arena or Stadium both unenforceable and irrelevant for Skid Row very soon.
Mm-hmm.
What else we got? Just endless live reviews, as is the tradition. There's a vitriolic kicking for a Chapter House slow dive Moose triple header at the Marquee in London. There is a Heavenly Records era Manic Street Preachers, also at the Marquee, getting a borderline incoherent fanzine style rave review. To be fair, there is some footage of this show on the Generation Terrorists 20th Anniversary Edition DVD, and it looks like an amazing show. Just like borderline riot sort of stuff.
Yeah, lots of stage diving, right? I read about this.
Yeah, that's exactly the one. Loads and loads of stage invasions and stage diving. Like, it's unclear who's in the band by the end of the set.
Yeah.
Teenage Fan Club get a rave review from Simon Price, who describes them as the saviors of pop. So I think we can safely assume that Melody Maker's Teenage Fan Club backlash is a way off yet. Flowered Up are hailed as being on the precipice of greatness after a allegedly stunning Reading Festival performance and the release of the Weekender single. And finally, there's what's with the benefit of what we know now, a fairly bleak review of Whitney Houston at Wembley Arena, having a bad night for most of her set, struggling with her vocals and vociferously complaining about sweating too much before pulling it all together for the end of the show. It's framed as an untouchable pop star, like having their pristine bubble punctured. But I think we can interpret that slightly differently in light of the biographical picture of Whitney Houston that's come to light since.
Yeah, absolutely.
Features are that cover double pager on electronic, one pager on the House of Love's return, playing 3 different London venues in one night, a big full colour 2-page interview of Billy Bragg, a page and a bit of the Levellers pictured in a swimming pool, perhaps to diffuse those unwashed crusty tropes.
What does the water look like?
Surprisingly clean. Not
It's not like when a dog jumps in a pool.
It's not the muddy brown you might expect. Finally, and just missing the cut due to recent exposure, there's a 2-pager with new major label sellouts Nirvana on the eve of their Nevermind album, with extensive quotes attributed to vocalist and guitarist Kurd, spelt Kurdt, Cobain, spelt with a K.
Wow, nice.
Nevermind's also the lead album review alongside an advanced tape of that whole debut mentioned earlier, as additional reviews for Van Morrison, Frankie Knuckles, Robert Wyatt, and someone we'll talk about later. Singles of the week are Cranes with Starblood and 9 Inch Nails with the very good Head Like a Hole. And that is Melody Maker this week.
This week I had The Enemy, as Graham said. On the cover, we had David Bowie, who is sat smoking a cigarette. The headline reads, Bowie still smoking, interview and LA launch. He's being interviewed to promote Tin Machine 2, which is the second and last album he recorded with his band Tin Machine, which I listened to this week, actually, out of due diligence. Have you ever heard the Tin Machine records?
I was aware of like the singles, like in that kind of early 90s thing, but like I know it attracts so much vitriol.
Yes.
But Like, is it actually that bad, or is it just this isn't what we want from David Bowie?
So I haven't heard the first album. I just listened to the second. The first album, they literally get to kicking within the interview, and it's like, come on, admit that was shit kind of thing when they do sometimes the interviewers. But the second one, they're basically saying this is a return to form. I mean, generally his 80s post Let's Dance, it's like, everything is just a bit of a miss is how it's portrayed. And this is his kind of slow walk back to kind of legend status. Yeah, it's fine. It sounds kind of quite anachronistically new wavy for 1991, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was good, and it's really brief. It's like 35 minutes, kind of in and out.
Great work.
Yeah, exactly. Interestingly, it's not available on DSPs. I had to listen to it on YouTube.
Really? Is that like the last stone they have left to unturned for the Bowie reissue campaigns? 8 CD Tin Machine outtakes
Yeah,
box set.
yeah. I mean, it's crazy because their first album and their live album is on there. Is on like DSPs, but not the second album. Also teased on the cover, the aforementioned Morrissey announcing UK live dates. We have box out images of the bands Banderas and PM Dawn. Also listed are House of Love, Venus Beads, Frasier Chorus, Specials, Mercury Rev, Billy Bragg, Interstellar, REM, and GTO. We are also promised an enormous 68 pages. Now, I love reading these issues. Genuinely, I do. But my heart always sinks when I get a large issue like this. It's like, give me a slender melody maker any day of the week. It's a lot less work. Are you shuffling through the melody maker to check the page load?
Yes, I am. I do not have 68 pages.
How many pages do you have?
This week, I have a concise and to the point 56 pages.
Nice. That's
So,
I'm very envious
yeah.
of that.
And bearing in mind how many adverts I have, like, we're not doing the whole 56.
Yeah. So, in the news this week, in the NME, Dr. Dre is found guilty of assaulting journalist Dee Barnes. Barnes filed a $22.75 million civil lawsuit against Dre and the other members of NWA, claiming she was libeled and slandered by the band after the incident. The amount she receives remains undisclosed. We've referenced this incident a couple of times in the past. I'm sure it will get a closer look in a future episode of this podcast.
Yeah, that'll be heartwarming.
Yeah, exactly. A bit lighter news. WoW Enterprise Limited release a new board game called Rave, which is described as a designer microcosm of the entire Acid House phenomenon. It contains a 12-track cassette compiled by the Orb. I actually looked at pictures of a complete version of this on eBay.
I was going to say, like, can we pause recording so I can go to eBay now?
So I'm going to read the description of the game from the back of the box. The text here is a little disjointed. Honestly, it reads like someone on ecstasy wrote this text. But here we go. So on the back it says, all you need to rave is a little skill and a screw loose. Your adventure...
Oh, this is going to be gold, I can tell.
Your adventure begins in Trip City. You've got 50 quid in your pocket and you're buzzing with energy. That's buzzing, BUZZIN apostrophe. Flyers and rumors come at you from every club you visit. But when you've got flyers in your hand, it's time to decide which rave looks pucker and fork out your ticket. So far, this has really reminded me of our clubbing experience because it's just the way we spoke to each other back in the day. This is when things start to go crazy. As you leave Trip City and travel from one meeting point to another, following the rumors on your flyer, vibe cards tell you what's going on and where Plod is patrolling. Maybe you're on the guest list. Maybe you're busted. But once you hit the right number and find your rave, get there and get dancing because you're running out of energy, spelled ENERGI, and everyone else is rushing like crazy. WoW status is just a beat away. Now, that's it. For a moment, I honestly considered buying a copy of this and playing it with my family to turn into a segment. Which no doubt would have been very entertaining, but
I mean, I'm still up for that as a
Yeah.
bonus episode.
Well, the shipping time made it impossible this week, but maybe we could do that. But you could join the families together and all sit around playing it. In other news, Willie Nelson has sold 160,000 copies of his album Who'll Buy My Memories, the IRS tapes. He sold 160,000 copies since its June release. It is reported that the Texan country singer needs 4 million sales to settle his outstanding debt to the IRS. Apparently, $3 from every album sold at 1995 is posted directly to the IRS, and another $1 to fund his lawsuit against his former accounting firm, whom he alleges gave him bad advice about tax. Again, we will probably cover this in more depth in the future. I can say that when I saw Willie Nelson play live at the end of the 90s, some wag in the audience heckled him with the line, "Willie, pay your taxes." So it's a big part of the Willie Nelson legend, this.
I was only dimly aware of this.
Yeah.
Um, I love the idea of putting the IRS tapes in the title.
Yeah, yeah. On bands are Mercury Rev, promoting your self-esteem, an album that will come out on multiple labels across multiple markets between 1990 and early 1993. And Poster Children, promoting their second album, Daisy Chain Reaction, which was released roughly simultaneously as a reissue of their debut album, 1989's Flower Power. Things moved slower back in the 90s, basically. I don't know if you find this, a lot of on bands, it's like, it's not like when we were reading The Enemy, where it's like they have a 7-inch coming out. Do you know what I mean? It's like some of these bands literally, as I say, they're midway through a debut album or even sometimes like a second album campaign.
Yeah, I have picked up on that, like, how established a lot of yon bands are. Like, how slow is the development curve moving?
I think it's that thing of just information just moves so much slower. And if you didn't hear about it from somewhere like The Enemy, I mean, where are you going to hear about it? It's just this is it. The power they wield is staggering, and it's like they will get around to promoting your band when they deem it, when they need to fill the column inches, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, I don't know if you find this, but the further we go back in the 90s, The Enemy and Melody Maker are stuffed with articles of bands I've literally never heard of. Like, I have
Yes.
no memory of at all. Or they just never rose up to the point where I would have been aware of them as a 12-year-old, or even that they were mentioned as like, you know, I think a lot of some bands from like the mid eight, like C86 bands would get mentioned as like Tallulah Gosh or something would get mentioned as like a punchline, like in the years when we were reading The Enemy, so you had some awareness
Mm.
of them, but just a lot of these bands just fell through the cracks. It just, there's just no impact. So this week we have articles on Banderas, Venus Beads, and Frasier Chorus. Any of those names ring a bell?
No, Banderas is one that I've seen, like, pop up in, like, the ads for some of the copies of the weeklies from this era,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
was like, "I have literally never heard of this group."
Yeah, yeah. They're quite distinctive visually. It's like two women with shaved heads. They're paired with
Mm.
Stephen Wells, who also had a shaved head. Literally, it says on the front, "We take the skinheads bowling," and there's a picture of one of them leaning against a bowling ball to show the similarities between her head and a bowling ball. So, and then we also have a 2-page feature on aging rock stars, spurred on, no doubt, by cover star David Bowie, a positively unforgivable 44 years old at this point.
Disgusting.
Yeah. Same as you, there's a feature on the live return of House of Love, and there's a classic, i.e., reprint interview with the specials. Singles of the week are reviewed by Graham Sherman, aka Sherman at the controls, so they're much more dance focused and dance friendly. Singles of the week go to the reissue of, at this point, 1-year-old Beltram Volume 1 EP by Joey Beltram, which features face chewing evergreen Energy Flash. Al
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Also, Dominator by Human Resource, which is another classic early 90s face chewer, and Funny How by Airhead, another band I hadn't heard of. This is kind of like indie pop crossover with very dated horns. You'd probably like it, actually. Um,
The ultimate backhanded compliment.
It sounds like a diss, but I was like, well, there's too many horns on here for me, but I know a man who loves him some horns. Featured album reviews are Don't Get Weird on Me Bae by Lloyd Cole, The Ukrainians by The Ukrainians, Hull's debut album Pretty on the Inside, another album we'll be circling back to. Lead live reviews are Interstellar, who the big fuss is made of, the Franca Waters, Revolver, and Flowered Up. There is a letter from a disgruntled reader asking the enemy to cover more grunge. They should buy the Melody Maker. And finally, in a momentous analog slot first, this issue, which I bought secondhand, has a paragraph highlighted in biro, presumably by its original owner in 1991. Are you ready for this, Graham?
Yeah, brilliant.
The highlighted extract is part of a review of Dire Straits' sixth and final album, On Every Street.
That really grabbed the reader's attention, yeah?
Well, the circled extract reads as follows. Liking Dire Straits is the phase you go through before you stop liking pop music altogether. This is not a cheap joke, just an incontrovertible fact. These words were written by Stuart McConey in his 6 out of 10 review of the album. I can only imagine these circled words were slammed down on a common room table to shame some poor Dire Straits fan in 1991. Although, of course, we'll never know.
I mean, I fundamentally disagree with the framing device. It's like, if you like Dire Straits, I'm guessing, like, you've stopped liking pop music a while back. It's not the last act before you stop.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Right, the train left the station yesterday.
yeah. That may say something about our age versus Stuart McConey's age, but yes, you're right. Well, if one of our contemporaries started liking Dire Straits, we'd be like, "Well, this is the beginning of the end." You'd be like, "This, the end has happened."
I I love the idea of us as teenagers as, like, someone stepping up to the car stereo and dropping in Dire Straits.
Have you read their sixth and much maligned final studio album, On Every Street? Features none of your favorites.
I do think my dad owns a copy of that. I remember that title.
The cover is super recognizable, and maybe this was us missing our chance to cover Dire Straits on this podcast. Something I'd actually like to do because I find them a bit of a mystery.
I mean, my main frame of references for them are, one, my dad liked them because he is of the appropriate age where, like, you'd like Dire Straits,
Yeah.
and two, as the university I went to in London, Goldsmiths, like, really prides itself on its kind of like relationship with, like, British music heritage. So, like, it'll always, like, play up the fact that, like, Malcolm McLaren went there, Blur went there, or most of Blur did anyway. I actually can't remember who else went there, but anyway, a lot of people went there who were, like, kind of had some vague connection to, like, cool counterculture. Also, Mark Knopfler went there,
Yeah.
and they'd always stick his name on the end. It's like, oh yeah, and this guy was the most successful of them all, but we don't talk about that.
Yeah. You slept in his bed, didn't you, in the halls of residence? What was it?
That's unconfirmed.
Calling Elvis, is anybody home? Calling Elvis, from here all alone. I didn't leave the building, I can't get to the phone. Calling Elvis.
So, Melody Maker, 14th September 1991. We are going to be talking about an hip hop act that we have not yet mentioned. Consider this an autopsy on the Daisy Age. We will be talking about self-immolating milestone, De La Soul is Dead. So, De La Soul is Dead is First Wave Native Tongues founders De La Soul's second album, following the, I'm going to say, surprise international success of their debut, 3 Feet High and Rising. De La Soul is Dead was released in May 1991, actually the day after my 12th birthday. So, thanks, De La Soul, by Tommy Boy Records. Tommy Boy Records is Tom Silverman's fairly sort of legendary semi-indie, semi-Warner's subsidiary, which was perpetually on the verge of bankruptcy, and specialized in hip-hop and electronic music. It was home to Queen Latifah, House of Pain, Coolio, and Naughty by Nature. Interestingly, Tommy Boy also loved a US license for UK dance music. So they were responsible for stateside releases of things like LFO and 808 State. In fact, I think my 12-inch I had, possibly still have, of Cubic by 808 State comes in a Tommy Boy sleeve and has a bunch of, like, weird US-specific mixes.
hip house remix.
Yeah, quite possibly. Like a Jungle Brothers a cappella stuck on top.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, we do not have time to go deep on Tommy Boy Records today, but I would highly recommend two sources of additional info. First up is what I've described on this podcast before as one of the greatest music industry books of all time, The Big Payback, The Business of Hip Hop by journalist, first wave source writer, and former Deaf American executive Dan Sharmas. That is an absolutely fantastic book. And the Tommy Boy chapter is just one part of an incredible whole. Secondly, there was my lockdown podcast highlight of Dante Ross, the former Tommy Boy and Elektra A&R and hip hop producer, talking about his career in music on the What Had Happened Was podcast with Open Mike Eagle. I think of the Dante Ross interviews, I think there's about 8 of them, and it's episode 2 that you want in the series, where he recounts his time at Tommy Boy. It is fantastically revealing of the chaos and dysfunction at the label, and also how closely he was working with De La Soul in particular. Continuing the theme of things we don't have time to get into, for at least their first 2 albums, De La Soul was signed or rather licensed to Big Life in the UK. That's a label co-founded by legendary / infamous, delete as applicable, British artist manager and general music business impresario Jazz Summers. Big Life would also release The Orb, Soup Dragons, Yaz, a pre-Ninja Tune Cold Cut, and British R&B boy band Damage. Jazz Summers passed away in 2015, but his 2013 autobiography titled inevitably Big Life is a hell of a ride. I would highly recommend that book.
Didn't even know that existed. I'm definitely going to read that.
I didn't know it existed either until a couple of years ago when I found a copy of it lying on the desk of the office of one of his former management clients.
Okay.
I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, you're mentioned on the back of this book. I mean, on the downside, Big Life also appears to have been the catalyst for many of the absolutely appalling UK dance remixes of De La Soul singles. It's safe to say that CJ Boland was eating off the back of De La Soul.
It's a legendary CJ Boland.
Man, those remixes are bad.
They are bad.
Right.
And
Right.
I mean, Ubiquitous doesn't begin to cover it.
Seriously, if you look at the alternative mixes on De La Soul singles from the first 2 albums, it is insane. It's like, who needed this many mixes, none of which sound particularly different?
Exactly. Every regional house variant for the UK is covered.
Seriously though, like, I swear there's like, that mix will go down really well in Leeds.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
but we need a different mix for Sheffield.
From donk to deep house.
Anyway, the lead single from De La Soul is Dead was Ring Ring Ring. That was named as Single of the Week by Melody Maker, and surprising to me at least, charted at number 10 in the UK.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's going to surprise you even more. I owned the single of that.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's got to be like an early single, or like one of the first singles you bought, right? Or were you like voraciously consuming like cassette singles by this point?
Actually, I was, because I would buy the discounted singles at the local Woolworths, which were about £1.
They'd always get yellow stickered in Woolworths, like at the end of the month, and you just go in and scoop up whatever took your fancy.
Exactly. And not that I particularly loved this song, but I would just buy any hip hop or like alternative guitar band singles that I saw. I think it's funny. I mean, we're going to get into this a lot more, but just, you know, it's something about this age, you're really getting switched on for the first time. Like, you're making active choices yourself in a way that feels different. Do you know what I mean? Like, the
Mhm.
pop music of this year in particular, and the year either side of it, feel really vivid to me. Like, I was kind of involved in it for the first time, rather than kind of finding out about it secondhand. Like, you were, I don't know, as I say, you make active single purchases and things like that, which just didn't really happen before.
Yeah, yeah. Like you're like forming your taste, aren't you? And like you're able to kind of participate in the consumer economy
Yeah.
rather than just taping shit off the radio.
That's a romantic way of putting it. Uh, but I
Yes.
also was taping a hell of a lot of shit off the radio, I can tell you that. Weekly, I was
Yeah.
making those top 40 mixtapes. Anyway, back to De La Soul, sorry.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, Ring 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 goes to number 10 in the UK. No thanks to you, as
Yeah.
you were waiting for the single to be discounted.
Yeah, also single mix different to the album mix.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a recurring theme here.
Mm.
It was also a big hit across Europe. Like there's like on a run of top tens, top fives. I think there's even a couple of number ones across Europe, and it was
Wow.
massive, massive in Oceania as well. I think it's like number 3 in Australia and number 1 in New Zealand. But ominously, it was a muted rollout in the US, where it
Mm.
scraped to number 22 in the R&B and hip hop chart. Follow-up single, a roller skating jam named Saturdays, releases in July. That was another Melody Maker single of the week, but performed worse by every available metric. So that goes to 22 in the UK, 43 on the US R&B and hip hop charts, and various top 20 placings across Europe.
Arguably a better song than the other single, but mystifying.
I mean, the performance is a travesty, and we will get into it. Although I do think there's something to be said for it having been the first single rather than the second. So I wanted to highlight these singles to try and build out the case that Melody Maker was invested in this album. When you give single of the week to the first two singles, like in that album campaign, like it's hard to avoid the conclusion that like you are back in this act and like you are anticipating sustained success. And I mean, like sure, why not? 3 Feet High and Rising had been this big worldwide crossover hit 2 years previously. There's like a string of UK hit singles from that album. So a new De La Soul album must have seemed like a no-brainer smash. Right. And yet, before I get into De La Soul is Dead, I think like you kind of preempted this with your single buying sprees. But like, how aware of the group like were you at this point in time? Had 3 Feet High and the singles made any impression on you?
Yeah, I was massively aware of this group because, as you said, those singles were huge in the UK, the 3 Feet High and
Mm.
Rising singles. And my best friend at the time loved this band and was like, as a 10-year-old, he had MTV, but from one of the first people I knew to get MTV. So he'd seen the videos multiple times and take them off TV, and we like watched them together and stuff like that. And he owned the singles on 12-inch, which were
That is cool for a preteen.
yeah, it's like 10-year-old. I think that they may well have been the first singles he ever bought
He's still a massive fan of CJ Boland.
to this day. Yeah.
You got any of those CJ Boland remixes?
Well, I mean, funnily enough, I can't remember the B-sides. I remember listening to the records with him, but I can't remember what was on the B-sides. But what I do remember, how colourful the album artwork was. Like, anybody that doesn't know and hasn't seen, like, this is very appealing to a child, like, kind of, super bright, primary coloured, big chunky letters. It looked like the way they presented it, it kinda looked like a kind of hipster piss take Sesame Street vibe. Do you know what I mean? Like that was kind of
Mm.
that's how I kind of read it. And when I was about 7 or 8, I was like, I was like, hip hop is for me. Do you know what I mean? That was the thing. I didn't understand what that meant, and I certainly had absolutely no discerning taste. But like all the stuff that kind of dribbled through on the radio or on TV, I'd be like, that's the thing that I like. That's my thing. And like, there's something that me and him would talk about. I will say at this point, in absolutely no depth, and if I was to list the artists and the hip hop compilations that I bought, it was all stumbling in the dark, like blind buying that truly resulted in some awful stuff and some bands that I'm even too embarrassed to mention on this podcast because I just, I'm 8, 9, 10 years old, but they kind of folded into that whole thing. I was ready for this subculture, and the the stuff they were taking the piss out of in those videos, I had some understanding of, as did my friends, and we could enjoy it in the way that it was meant. And it almost seemed like to us anyway, because we were unsophisticated 10-year-olds, they were like a kind of comedy sketch act that had made singles that were almost like these kind of novelty records because they were super hooky and they had like some funny punchline rhymes in. So yeah, that's my relationship to that period of their career. And then obviously A De La Soul is Dead. It's like it has much less of an impact culturally. Certainly did on me. Beyond that, me buying that single, I was largely unaware of this record until later in my life.
Yeah, I definitely get where you're coming from with the singles. Like, I feel like they sort of seeped into our age bracket's consciousness just like very, very readily. The artwork I hadn't considered, but you're absolutely right. It's almost like kind of precision engineered to grab the preteen mind.
There's something about that like funkadelic sample on Me, Myself and I. It's amazing. It really distills that kind of stoner humor element of that band down into like one sample. Do you know what I mean? It's like so outrageously infectious and cool, but also it's like its tongue is in its cheek and that tongue has a tab of acid on it. Do you know what I mean? It's just like it's really it's a good choice, that sample, and it punched through to 10-year-olds in the UK.
That's a really good articulation of like the kind of the P-funk, like slightly edgy court jester vibe in
Yes,
a
that's
nutshell.
the edgy court jester. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But like, it's really interesting you call out that specific sample because one of the clearest memories like I have from like kind of getting deeper into music in the 90s. I think we talked before about like how life changing it was for me by like a £5 appallingly packaged
Yeah.
compilation of Funkadelic.
Yeah, yeah.
Me, Myself, and I takes the synth and drum intro from not just Knee Deep by Funkadelic from their '79 album Uncle Jam Wants You. I think Knee Deep was Funkadelic's last chart hit in the
Mm.
US. It is an incredible, incredible song, but I was completely unaware of it when I bought that Funkadelic compilation CD. Like, as far as I was concerned, De La Soul had those synths and those kick drums,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
like
yeah.
that was what they'd done. So the first time I played through that album and that track started, like it was like some sort of like neurological trigger had been
Yeah,
pulled.
yeah.
Like, so I involuntarily leapt out my chair.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I think that speaks to like just how kind of like embedded those singles were in popular culture in the late 80s.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, but we're not here to talk about Three Feet Iron Rising. We're here to talk about De La Soul is Dead, and that is a very different proposition.
Yeah, it really is.
I was tempted to make a case for this being hip hop's answer to In Utero, but
Hmm.
that is a little melodramatic and not really backed up by the sound of the album, even if the intent kind of aligns. Also, we've talked about Nirvana a lot recently, and that primary place in our coverage is, as we all know, reserved for John Squire's legendary Seahorses. But for decades, De La Soul is Dead had this reputation as a career suicide album. In a reductive sense, it's like chirpy, happy-go-lucky hippies turn grumpy old men and spend an hour on an exceptionally dour record complaining about fame, women, their perception as nerds, and the music industry.
An hour plus.
Well, yeah, we'll get into that. The public responds by not buying it, and the group are cast out into the wilderness of endless European tours and jazz cafe shows until such time as Damon Albarn picks them up and adds them to his traveling musical colonialist circus. Woof. To be clear, there is some truth to that perception. Like, for a start, the toneless record is overwhelmingly, although not exclusively, weary. The proper opening track, after you've got past one of the interminable skits, is Oodles of O's, and it sets like a really self-consciously like monochrome scene with this dragging beat and like flat low energy vocals that absolutely embody a kind of leave me the fuck alone vibe.
Yeah, yeah.
And like that vibe is distinct from like stoned or even like say like clinically depressed. It is explicitly we are burnt out from the act of being De La Soul. Like give us a break. That vibe is not one that elicits a huge amount of sympathy from me. particularly when it's combined with entire tracks based on De La Soul's ability to, contrary to alleged popular perception, punch people, which is what Peas Porridge is about. I think we've mentioned this before, but there's this kind of endless background hum of misogyny, like, but it's this background hum as opposed to like the obnoxious cartoon shit in things like the Death Row discography. That sort of buzzing, sort of inverted commas, common sense misogyny is a feature of early native tongues, and I find it exhausting. I think De La Soul have got form here. There's an early kind of trace of it on 3 Feet High and Rising with Jenny, which is like kind of big sort of like policing women's behavior shit. But then the wider native tongues crew do it as well. I love Tribe Called Quest's Low End Theory, but there's a track on there called Infamous Date Rape, which really trashes the vibe of an otherwise pretty near perfect record with this kind of cack-handed inversion of Believe Women.
Mm.
And then Brand Nubian, who are always like on the more militant end of the spectrum, do like the kind of pompous paternal lecturing shtick on like on Slow Down to like numbing effect. I mean, yeah, this stuff really grates on me from the perspective of like, you know, the 2020s. Like it's a really blunt reminder of how reductive the conscious flag is when it's applied to hip hop. The gender politics at play in most of these records are reflective of a bunch of young guys hanging out with other young guys in a hyper masculine environment. At least on De La Soul is Dead, there's the faintest trace that the members know they're fucking idiots.
Yeah, do you take Peas Porridge at face value? Because I always thought they were taking the piss. Like, I didn't think they really, because it's kind of slightly cartoonish, the violence in that song. I thought their tongue was slightly in their cheek, you know, when they were saying, "We're going to fuck you up if we see you in the club," kind of thing.
I feel like there's a lot of that kind of trying to have your cake and eat it,
Mm.
like tongue in cheek stuff through the album. There's this faint trace to the idea of like the members like know they're being idiots. So one of my album highlights from De La Soul is Dead is Hey Love, which is about 2 minutes long. It's kind of like half skit, half song. It's got this beautiful kind of hazy sunset production and this spoken word back and forth between like a dismissive, bored sounding Posthumus and an audibly upset, articulate, unnamed woman trying to get some clarity on his commitment to their relationship. Throughout the kind of back and forth, as she gets more articulate, he gets more dismissive until the track ends with him like, like suddenly with him responding by just making these like super undignified, like idiot mouth noises in response to a nuanced assessment of why their relationship is failing. And I'm kind of like, how self-aware is that?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And like they do actually reuse that device on a track later in the album. Bitties in the BK Lounge is this kind of male MC versus female MC battle. And at the end of the track, when the final female MC like eviscerates Trugoy, he just responds with like the incoherent mouth noises again, and the track finishes.
Yeah.
For all the album's hard work, and in reference to that, I'd call out a Prince Paul quote from 1999. Prince Paul being the producer of 3 Feet High and Rising and De La Soul is Dead, and its follow-up, Balloon Mind State. He says, "There was a lot of disillusionment with the industry. When I when I listen to it now, the rap sound, shall we say, bitter."
Mm.
But, like, when you cut through that bitterness, I like those interminable like skits upon skits. As a side note, I got lucky. I was introduced to this album via the 50-minute, like incredibly muddy sounding UK vinyl pressing that cuts a lot of the flab. The CD version and the DSP version, as I'm sure you're aware, is 27 tracks long and runs to 73 minutes. Like it is exhausting.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, despite all that, there are some incredible high points on here. Millie pulled a pistol on Santa is this super harrowing but incredibly vivid sort of storytelling rap you'd expect from like a Snoop or a Nas on top form, built around, funnily enough, another funkadelic piano loop. I'd not actually made this connection when I was writing my notes, but it feels like such a reaction against like something like Me, Myself, and I.
Uh-huh.
It's like, oh, we made like a kind of like a whimsical sing along, like crossover rap hit using a funkadelic piano loop. Like, watch what we do now.
Yeah, yeah.
And Even though there is, like, yet more kind of trust no woman sulking, Keeping the Faith is this, like, musically brilliant closer to the album that, like, hacks up, like, Bob Marley, Steve Arrington, and Bob James into this beat that's kinda it's, like, simultaneously, like, ethereal and propulsive. That's a really cool trick.
Yeah, and surprised that the last 2 tracks you mentioned were like a double A-side single at the end of the album campaign.
Yes, so I didn't realize this until, like, I went in Discogs because in the UK, Big Life put out "Keeping the Faith" as its own single.
Yeah. It's got a video.
Yeah, filled it with terrible remixes, needless to say. However, leaving all that aside, the album highlight, and in my view, career highlight, is the inconveniently named A Roller Skating Jam named Saturdays that we talked about briefly earlier. Coming back to this album after years away, I remembered this being a highlight, but I was a bit skeptical about how it had aged. And it turns out the answer is fantastically. There's so many samples fighting for space here in a kind of like last hurrah for the kind of sample collage era.
That scribbling you hear under the track is the Avalanches making notes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh man, this is the Avalanche's career in a record.
Yeah, yeah, it really is.
Yeah, there's so many samples fighting for space here. Like the key ones are like there's the intro flip of "Got My Mind Made Up" by Instant Funk,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
South Soul group, which like I know is a record dearly beloved by us both.
Mhm.
There's the grease stabs from the Frankie Valli record from the film. Then there's that sort of looping, like liquid electric piano, which is taken from a track called "Good Vibrations" by the Mighty Riders, which is one of those really rinsed old funk breaks you would struggle to name as its own record, but instantly recognize. Weirdly, like the opening verse from Q-Tip, um, I love. It's in the mold of his guest spot on D-Light's Groove is in the Heart.
Yeah.
Like it's exactly the same flow, exactly the same sort of vibe. But for some reason, like I think it just fits brilliantly here when I don't enjoy him on Grooves in the Heart at all. Uvinia Mahika's vocals on the hook are just fantastically rich, like really kind of emphasize like what an amazing vocalist she can be. I think she's got a lot more recognition, like in retrospect, than she did at the time, where she was like a kind of consistent part of that wider native tongues ecosystem.
Yeah, I often think when I hear her vocals that I'm listening to a sample of an old record, and then I hear it placed in the drums, it's like, "Oh, no, that's her," like, because it's such a classic sound that she has.
From memory, she is from that era. Like I think she is a lot older than everyone else.
Okay, okay.
Because I remember she's around for native tongues, like kind of like 90s pomp, and then she reappears on a lot of raucous records, like at the turn of the century. And I think by that point she was in her late 40s, early 50s. The whole track has the momentum of like a spontaneous summer evening, like escalating into the best night of your life in the way that such things happen when you're young. Like it's this undiluted blast of positivity. Like I absolutely adore it. And it is completely out of step with the sour quality of the rest of the album.
Yeah.
It's like the last gasp of 3 Feet High and Rising, like somehow snuck onto the album. So all of my eulogizing of key tracks aside, Adam, you know what time it is. I think we've established subtly so far that you are De La agnostic, but have you had much exposure to this album? Like I sort of assume this would have been the kind of thing that was in rotation when you were on the South Coast, not through your choice, but just for your surroundings.
Yeah, absolutely it was. I really like this album. I'll surprise you to say I'm not keen on the lore surrounding this album. Do you know what I mean? Like everything that like, I like the album itself, but to listen to it, I kind of have to divorce myself from the fact that this is kind of it's made by 3 kind of grumpy young men who don't want people to think that they're gay.
Yeah, that's not going to encourage anyone to like open their ears, is it?
Yeah, it's a bit. You know how vicious like some of Kanye West's misogyny is. I always think that's a reaction against being this kind of backpack music nerd. Do you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
I need to prove to everyone that like I'm not some bookish asexual loser, so I need to go twice as hard on
Yeah, they think I'm a simp, watch this.
Yeah, exactly. So it has a bit of that to it, but then, as I said, it's so just the kind of the skits that run through it, which, and it's that thing. It's not just skits; it's tracks that where does the skit end and the track begin? Do you know what I mean? It's like it's really interwoven that stuff. Yeah, I think it's really good. I actually love this record. I much prefer it to 3 Feet High and Rising. As I said, I'm able to compartmentalize, especially at this age. I'm able to take away the vibe that kind of surrounds it and the general the as you say, the way they were in the press about it and kind of and make that a separate thing and just enjoy what is just an incredibly well-made album full of really good music. But fuck me, there's a lot of it. Like,
Yeah, there really is.
73 minutes or whatever. It's exhausting. Yeah, also Ring 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 is like that's about biters basically, right, isn't it? That's like them. It's like this those of these acts riding on our coattails and we hate them all and we're nothing to do with them. It's always very whingy and like it's really that kind of micro scene politics just starts to seem really quite pathetic the older you get. And you
Yeah.
wish people didn't make music about it because it just seems stupid and infantile.
So graceless and such a poor use of everyone's time.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, why does this bother you so much? Like, it's just make a different album, but don't make the content of so much of your lyrics be about the fact that guess what, we're making a different album and we're not the people you thought we were. It's like, yeah, we get it. Just make the album make the music make that statement, but you don't have to telegraph it every 5 seconds. But having said all that, whenever I hear it, I'm just like, well, I really like this. 3 Feet High and Rising, I find much more grating than De La Soul is Dead. I really do. What comes after this? It's a kind of half album, right?
After this is Balloon Mind State. So that's the last one they do with Prince Paul. Yeah, Balloon Mind State is if like if De La Soul is Dead is a blueprint for Big Beat, then Balloon Mind State is a blueprint for Mowax. They still have Prince Paul, but like they have guest spots from like Japanese MCs, and they get in like Fred Wesley and Maceo Parker and Pee Wee Herman from the JBs to like play live with them. It feels like it's like a combination of like kind of like East Coast head nod conventionalism, but also like acid jazz experimentalism.
Is it good?
Like it has a really nice baseline of like quality, which I think 3 Feet High and Rising and De La Soul is Dead like have less so.
What is your favorite De La Soul album?
I think it's De La Soul is Dead, but I fundamentally don't enjoy their approach to albums, like at this stage of their career, with like loading up on all the skits and sort of like and kind of interstitial stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I can see it's like, they're like kind of music nerds who sit around, smoke weed, eat junk food, and listen to like comedy records that they've got at thrift stores and stuff like that. And they kind of want to recreate that vibe. That's kind of what I imagine is happening
Mhm.
here. But yes, you're right. It doesn't make for repeat listenings. It starts to get a bit much.
But then equally, like I feel like when they try and shed all of that stuff and make like straightforward East Coast hip hop records, like Stakes is High, like those are pretty dull records.
Yeah, yeah, I think I've heard that once. I always was like, yeah, maybe that's really good because people love that record, but I've never returned to it.
Yeah, it's produced by JD. So
Mm,
Dilla, it gets the uplift from being associated with him,
okay.
like from that reappraisal over the last 15 years. Anyway, back to De La Soul is Dead. And more importantly, back to the article which inspired this section
Yeah,
in
right.
the first place, which we have not mentioned once
I was
so
gonna
far.
say, just now a distant memory for me. I was thinking, I was like, was it a review? Was it a
Well, this is the thing. Like the nature of the article is like is more interesting than the article itself.
okay? Okay.
So remember, this is September '91. So we're 4 months on from the LP release, and 2 months on from the most recent single of the week, Patronage from Melody Maker. Big Life, or their press officer at least, have found a way to squeeze some extra coverage out of a stalling album campaign. And land De La Soul a spot in a section of Melody Maker that we have not previously ventured to.
Mm,
So we are going into the control zone, the high-tech lowdown section. usually the preserve of people with fringes talking about guitar pedals or backlines. But we will instead be led through the sample selection and assembly process by the group's DJ and occasional third MC, Maceo, which is a weird choice when you consider the album, just like 3 Feet High, was produced by the aforementioned Prince Paul. There's like he's absolutely fundamental to the sound of like this era of De La Soul. So it's kind of baffling how much he's sidelined here. There's like a cursory mention of our producer Prince Paul, but the focus is all on the three members of De La Soul and their creative process. Um, the way that creative process is presented, like, actually reminded me a little of the intended characterization of Aphex Twin we heard about the other week.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's this idea that like the trio are just in a perpetual state of creativity, and that the eventual album that comes out at the end of that process is like a result of various filters and restrictions placed on their creativity by the music industry. So they're always recording, they're always ripping and looping up samples, they're always kind of like creating rhymes and like humming like vocal hooks, right? And then they assemble all those disparate parts into fully fleshed out tracks in the studio and then build an album out of the resulting pool of tracks. So both 3 Feet High and De La Soul is Dead claim to have taken a month to record and assemble in the studio, but then each had to go for a protracted 3-month long period of sample clearance negotiation. This is where things get a little vague in the feature for reasons that, you know, will become clear. Maceo claims that it's not too much of a problem these days because everybody's used to the idea of sampling. The only problem is the money. That statement's not quite true, as is well known by this point. The De La Soul back catalogue has been through some shit. There's some early 2000s 2 CD reissues of 3 Feet High and Rising that packaged in remixes, alternative versions, and retracks because the people needed to hear those CJ Boland remixes on CD. But between ownership flux, I think the De La Soul back catalogue went from Tommy Boy to Warner's, back to Tommy Boy, and then finally Reservoir Media, one of the kind of contemporary sort of catalogue like acquisition firms.
Shout out Reservoir Media. My good friends. Yeah.
They acquired the Tommy Boy catalog in 2021, so this sits with them now. So you got all that ownership flux, what might be euphemistically described as accounting irregularities, stemming from De La Soul's Tommy Boy contract predating digital media, and I think my understanding is that it therefore defaults to like this super low ancillary royalty rate because it's not defined in the formats. And then finally, the dawning realization from Reservoir Media that Tommy Boy were not exactly thorough with their sample clearance procedures. And as a result, these albums only appeared on streaming platforms in 2023 after a massive re-clearance program run by DMG Clearances, which is one of the heavyweight sample clearance and license negotiation firms in the US. De La Soul themselves torpedoed an effort from Tommy Boy to launch the catalog on DSPs back in 2019, basically flagging that Tommy Boy had played fast and loose with sample clearance at the time of release. This is what led to De La Soul back in the late 80s getting sued to astronomical levels by the 60s site group, the Turtles, for the use of a brief loop on 3 Feet High and Rising. You would think that would be an instructive lesson for Tommy Boy, but unfortunately it does not look like it changed much for the following albums. So if you combine that awful digital royalty with all of this sample clearance ambiguity, which De La Soul themselves articulated in more detail on Sway's radio show in the US around about 2019, while also urging fans to boycott the re-releases, that was the point where Tommy Boy abandoned the digital rollout of the catalogue.
So just to be clear, the Tommy Boy reissues were abandoned because the band didn't believe that that they had done due diligence on the sample clearance.
No, the Tommy Boy reissues were abandoned because the group were like, we're not getting paid properly for this. Like, this is a scam.
Okay.
Like I mentioned, Reservoir acquired the Tommy Boy catalog in 2021, went into action trying to tidy all this up. So there is a great okplayer.com interview with Deborah Manning Gardner, the DMG of DMG Clearance, talking about how protracted this process was, and that it had started back in 2018, 2019, but had been torpedoed by the group's dispute with Tommy Boy. and that radio interview, basically spooking potential licensees. Like, no one wanted to sign a new contract with people when it was like, what the hell is going on between the label and the artist?
Yeah.
That process was then reactivated by Reservoir and fast-tracked over the course of a year. Process wasn't 100% successful. There are apparently certain tracks that have punched in replayed samples versus the original loops. But crucially, De La Soul is Dead, 3 Feet High and Rising, and Balloon Mind State all came back to DSPs in 2023.
Some with re-recorded samples.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's I mean, it's pretty hard to verify how accurate this is, but there's someone kind of like very much sort of like studio side of the industry talking about how they replayed some samples under like direct supervision from Principal, who I don't think has really commented much on on this whole process, if at all. But yeah, the albums came back to streaming. Well, came to streaming in 2023, and in that intervening period between the original release and the contemporary digital reissue, the reputation of De La Soul is Dead's been transformed. It's gone from this critically divisive and commercially underwhelming flop. Well, I should note it was certified gold in the US, to being lauded as one of the 500 greatest albums of all time by Rolling Stone, as well as one of the best albums of the 90s by Spin magazine. It's this kind of treasured chapter in a discography by a group that, largely down to questionable contracts, volatile copyright laws, and what you might call risk-averse owners.
Not to mention not very good albums being released after this period.
Don't fuck with my narrative. um, it's a treasured chapter in a discography by a group, but largely down to questionable contracts, volatile copyright laws, risk-averse owners. They weren't able to capitalize on on the popularity and rediscovery of their work for years. That point about risk-averse owners, Manning Gardner makes the point that Paul's Boutique and Fear of Black Planet, to name just 2 albums, are albums equally loaded with samples that almost certainly weren't fully cleared. I mean, like, Paul's Boutique samples the Beatles, for fuck's sake.
That's right. Yeah.
So a lot of it comes down to like the desire of the owner to get these albums out there, and kind of how willing they are to just press the button. Bringing us right up to date though, unfortunately not all of De La Soul got to enjoy that moment of kind of widespread acclaim and kind of rediscovery. Dave Jolicoeur, also known as Trugoy the Dove, one of the core 3 members, passed away suddenly 2 weeks before the reissues launched. Surviving members, Postunos and Maceo, it's Kelvin Mercer and Vincent Mason, they continue to tour and record as De La Soul. And a modern audience, a fair few of whom I'm sure will have discovered them via those Damon Albarn and Gorillaz collaborations, are able to hear the group at their creative peak again. But looking at all that kind of rubble of uncleared samples, dodgy contracts, and label volatility, I'm kind of left thinking, what a waste of 20 years.
Yes, man. So kick the wham on this jam. Oh, Mr. Sprinkler. Wet me for one, Mr. Sprinkler. I'm heating high five and a day's no split. With the yawn, I trip to the dawn. Out comes the bodies following the one I did.
It is the 14th of September 1991. This week I had The Enemy. One of the most interesting things about going this far back in the 90s is passing through the pop culture ephemera of our childhood. In 1991, I was 12 years old. Anyone alive in the UK at this time will remember the all-consuming monocultural touchstones of this year. In film, this is the year of Terminator 2, Judgment Day, The Addams Family, and Beauty and the Beast. These films were huge then, and to varying degrees, their legacy still exists in our contemporary culture.
That's mad that those all came out in the same year. I have them in totally different eras.
It's absolutely mad. In music, you have songs like Gypsy Woman by Crystal Waters, Gonna Make You Sweat, Everybody Dance Now by CNC Music Factory and Freedom Williams.
Hell yeah.
And Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana. Songs like these dominated 1991 and remain part of our cultural memory today. But for every I'm Too Sexy, There are countless tracks that feel utterly lost to time, but nonetheless bounce around in your adult brain. With this in mind, this week I would like to talk about Billy Bragg's sixth album, Don't Try This at Home, which is the lead review in this week's NME. And in particular, I'd like to talk about Billy Bragg's sexuality. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Yeah, I know. By fucking juveniles.
Yeah. So Sexuality was the closest thing he had to a hit single, which was released in the summer of 1991. Graham, I don't want you to play your hand too early here, so we'll get into this in more depth later. But as a sense check, do you remember Sexuality by Billy Bragg?
Yes, I got 2 words for you. Phil Jupitus.
Okay, well, we'll be coming back to him later. He wasn't known as Phil Jupitus at this point. He had a directing pseudonym, which you're going to want to punch yourself in the face when I read it to you. So, some background on Billy Bragg. Billy Bragg was born in Essex in the late 50s. His first band, Riff Raff, arrive in the late 70s and play a kind of punky pub rock. They have a song called Romford Girls, which, along with Bragg's soon-to-be trademark Essex-inflected singing voice, give him a strong sense of geographical identity. In late 1983, he releases his debut solo album, Life's a Riot with Spy vs. Spy. Here he lays out the musical template that will carry through the rest of his career.
Can I interrupt briefly?
Yes, you can.
I'd just like you to clarify whether, when you say he copyrighted his Essex singing style, whether that's a figure of speech or whether he literally owns the IP to singing in an Essex accent.
I said that it was soon to be trademark.
Soon to be trademarked. That's it.
Yeah, which yeah.
I love the idea of kind of cuddly socialist Billy Bragg actually extracting money from anyone daring to sing in an Essex accent.
Yeah, it was a euphemism. So it's a musical template which carries through the rest of his career, as I was saying. It's politically charged storytelling, folk songs delivered with a punk directness that is unapologetically working class, and a political template as well, which is basically I would characterize as old school Labour, democratic socialism, pro trade union.
Yeah, it's Red Wedge, isn't it?
Exactly.
Kind of like old school, like 80s, like quite far left Labourism.
Absolutely. So Life's a Riot with Spy vs. Spy was released on Charisma Records imprint Utility. This label was specifically created to release low-cost stripped Mac records by new artists. Bragg was perfect for this with his post-punk folky busker persona. Charisma and Utility with it collapse in 1983, and Bragg moves to Go Discs, where he remains until their dissolution in the mid-90s. Him being signed to Go Discs just completely reframed his career for me. He seems the perfect fit for an independent label like this. So, for listeners who don't know, other notable Go Discs artists are the House Martins, later Beautiful South, the Pogues, and analog slop favourites, the Lars. These artists seem of a piece to me, like working class perspectives, regional focus, songwriter-led folk authenticity, yet all capable of delivering mainstream hits.
Am I right in thinking Paul Weller ends up on Go Discs as well?
Paul Weller's debut solo album, released in 1992, was on Go Discs.
Lovely.
The self-titled Paul Weller. So Bragg doesn't have the hits that these bands have. While signed to Go Discs, he has 5 releases placed in the top 40. 3 of these are EPs. One is a double A side, taken from a Beatles cover album and released by the NME in 1988 in aid of Childline, where on one side you have Wet Wet Wet's cover of With a Little Help from My Friends. I'm sure you remember that, Graham.
Could forget.
Yeah. And on the other side is Bragg and Cara Tivey covering She's Leaving Home. This gets to number 1, but let's be honest, Wet 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 get to number 1 and Billy Bragg is on the B side.
I have never heard that version of She's Leaving Home.
No, me neither. Me neither. I doubt that 7-inch got flipped many times to the Wet 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 fans that bought it. So this leaves Sexuality. The first single released from Don't Try This at Home in July of 1991. It reaches 27. But I don't want to talk about Bragg's sexuality just yet. As I mentioned, Don't Try This at Home is the lead review in this week's NME under the title William the Conqueror. Conqueror is spelt Conkerer, which I was slightly confused by until I realised, of course, that Billy Bragg has a big nose and conch is British slang for nose. So there you go.
Okay, I did not put that together. I was trying to work out if it was like using a game of conkers as like some metaphor for capitalism's failings.
That's what I thought. But the reviewer, David Quantick, he uses a word in this review I'd never seen before, and I had to look it up. And we're going to get to it in a minute. So yeah, Quantic reviews it. He gives it a 9, and this album is like quite star-studded, which actually you alluded to in the news section. So Peter Buck is the co-writer of second single "You Woke Up My Neighborhood," which also features Michael Stipe on backing vocals.
Didn't know that.
You can't miss him. That kind of distinctive yowl that he does, especially at this point, is like runs right through the chorus. He also appears in the video for the track, which is shot, the exterior anyway, at Buck's house. Peter Buck also plays mandolin on this and another track on the album. Kirsty MacColl sings backing vocals on a couple of tracks. Johnny Marr plays guitar and is the co-writer of Sexuality.
That's mental. He's got the guitarist from the Smiths and half of the biggest alternative band in the world at that moment on his album.
Yeah, it completely reframed the way I thought of him. That and the Go disc signing. Yeah, I had no idea about any of this, and actually I'm going to expand on this in a second about where his career is. But yeah, continuing the kind of celebrity link, ish. The two promo videos for the two singles from this are both shot by a young Phil Jupitus, and he appears in both videos. Phil Jupitus at this point is referred to under the pseudonym Porky the Poet.
Yep, you're right. I am punching myself in the face.
But back to Buck and Stipe. In the US, it seems that over the 80s, Bragg was something of an artist's artist. This really floored me. He appeared on Letterman several times in the late 80s and early 90s.
Yeah, this is definitely before our time, isn't
Yeah,
it?
exactly. And he appears on stage with Buck many times and had really good college radio support. I imagine the reaction of the broader US public upon hearing Bragg's music was something along the lines of, "What is wrong with that man's voice?" Um, but regional difficulties aside, he seems to have had enough of a following to warrant repeat visits to the US. I mean, the reason I know he was on Letterman several times is because there's footage of him performing Sexuality on Letterman in '91. This has just slightly blew my mind.
It's amazing that something so like Anglo-centric
Yeah,
would get that traction in the US.
absolutely. Because obviously, Carter USM is what they had there. We could do Billy Bragg business over there.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, I think when we talked about Carter, like you mentioned that, like their career management basically like boiled down to phoning up Billy Bragg's manager.
Yes.
At the time, I was like, "Oh, that's a weird frame of reference."
Yeah.
But when you put it in that context, it's like, nope, that's good business. That is very shrewd.
That all makes sense. Yeah, he's having a decent career. He's Billy Bragg's eating out there. I mean, he's not.
He's not seeing CJ Boland remix money.
Well, Graham, that's where you're wrong. We're going to get to this soon. So his broader profile is reflected in Quantic's review, as we've just gone through. This seems very strange to us mid to late 90s kids, but in the early 90s, with the 80s not long ended, Bragg is at the centre of the alternative music world in the UK. This album seems a clear move to capitalise on this credibility and have some unapologetic mainstream success. Quantic frames his change in 1991 like this. So, Billy went off around the world, slumming and chumming with Kershaw and Stipe. He played benefit gigs with Nick Kershaw and various
Okay.
Nicaraguans, occasionally performing Tank Park Salute or Bowie's Star at a festival or two, and then Chang. Who is this large, prober-sized, that's the big nose word that I didn't know, gent singing, "I've had relations with girls from many nations" on the TV and radio.
It's a bold statement from a man with that profile.
Yeah, let me just say, The line from Sexuality is I've had relations with girls from many nations. Not the way I read it made it sound like I've had relations with girls from many nations on the TV and radio.
Channel 5 would not launch for several years.
Exactly. Nations is where Bragg ends. Yeah. So Quantic's review repeatedly presents Don't Try This at Home as a significant advance rather than continuation. He calls it a fine thing, suggesting Bragg is experimenting in the pop marketplace. Notes that your actual Bragg sound is radically altered, and ultimately concludes that Bragg has made his best album. In the front of the Enemy, Bragg is interviewed in the Material World column, which is a kind of quick-fire Q&A on a variety of concepts, which I think was long gone by the time we were reading The Enemy. But you'll see it as a weekly feature when you read copies from this time. His question here directly about selling out, to which he replies, I've come to more of an accommodation with the music industry through experience rather than defeat. But this album is not wall-to-wall pop bangers. It is long. It's a double vinyl album with a length around 60 minutes over its 16 tracks.
Oh, wow. He's gone full CD era.
Yes. So I listened to this album several times this week. You could cut it in half, roughly in half, and get a folkier Lars debut style breezy listen that you want to repeat as soon as it's over. There's enough good stuff on here that I could have been like, oh my God, am I going to have to buy a Billy Bragg album and, put it in regular. It's just got that very kind of, well, the sound I don't think you like, but that kind of early 90s indie pop production that to me just goes down easy. And some of the songs are so hooky and well written, and the the songwriting and sort of storytelling is so good that you could just return over and over again. But at 60 minutes, it's not really worth it.
That's 60 minutes of a lot of jangling.
Well, not enough jangling, actually, it was my
Okay.
problem. Yeah. I could have done with one, like sexuality and then 9 subsexualities and been like, "Good enough for me. I'll give this a spin every now and again," but that's not what
Mhm.
this is. But anyway, there are some highlights, including "Cindy of a Thousand Lives," which has a kind of 60s pop, dream pop, lightly shoegaze feel that really stood out to me. Quantic describes it as a staggering echo monster. There's the penultimate track, "Wish You Were Her," which is perhaps even more surprising. It's kind of like blue-eyed soul via beautiful south sound that Quantic characterizes as an alarming, neat Chi-Lights impression.
The title just reminds me of that postcard in The Simpsons.
Yeah. Another highlight is the up-tempo opener, which really, I was like, okay, here we go. This album could be great. Which is Cool Accident Waiting to Happen, which is described by Quantic as a thunderous, frenzied rock bastard. And then there's the countryish but co-write You Woke Up My Neighborhood, which would be a grower on an album less stuffed, but as track 5 of 16 just gets lost in the shuffle as kind of pleasant filler. So even though I personally like a good chunk of the album, I I really wanted to like it more than I did. I have to disagree with Quantic slightly here. I was disappointed that the album did not deliver on its pop promise, which he seems to think it did.
16 tracks is crazy. I cannot believe someone was like, "Yes, this should be this long."
Well, it's just a double vinyl album. So it's now time to talk about Billy Bragg's sexuality. So 2 singles released on this album. Don't Try This at Home, which were You Woke Up My Neighborhood and Sexuality. The song Sexuality was seared into my brain as a 12-year-old. I love this song. So not to be too self-indulgent.
Not on this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Well, not to be even more self-indulgent, but basically my philosophy on pop music is co-opted from the popular idea about fashion, which goes something like this, that looking good requires some personal discomfort. So if pop music does not make you feel at least a little discomfort, then it's not pop music. By which I mean, if it complies too much to accepted notions of taste, it's not pop music. Pop music hijacks your emotion and pisses all over taste. It can co-opt taste, but in order to be successful, it must be working largely outside of it.
Yeah, I love that shit. Like, I think I've spoken before about how I think when we covered the Manics, and I was talking about how the first time I saw them, they were on top of the pops doing "You Lovers," looking ridiculous. and, like, annoying my parents and making me feel slightly uncomfortable, and I was just like, "Yep, I'm all in."
Well, as an extension of that, Billy Bragg singing the words, "Just because you're gay, I won't turn you away," mugging in a promo directed by Phil Jupitus for a song that's most ambitious musical idea is to be catchy, clearly falls outside of people's ideas of what does and does not constitute good taste. But it succeeds where most artists with taste cannot, where only pop music can, in that it hijacks your emotions and brings you into a state of total feeling. For the almost 4 minutes of listening to this song, it's like existing in a romantic comedy montage, one that pulls no punches in trying to convince you that life is full of the potential to feel good. I mean, I just love this song. There's a few songs like this from previous decades. I really, I'm now going to segue full into old man shaking fist at cloud territory. But there's something about the intention behind the song which could have only been innocently received in the early 90s, in that this kind of pre-internet era where it's like your first thought is not, you know, this song's going to get pulled apart by people. Do you know what I mean? And it's going to it's motivations and should we or should we not be talking about this kind of thing, and the politics of it are going to be endlessly dissected. It just is it's just its own thing, and you can take it as a kind of well-intentioned a well-intentioned song about sexual liberation, sexual freedom, and living the life you want to live without getting angry about, reactions on either side of the political spectrum.
It's a really sincere good faith statement. Like, there's no cynicism, like, there's not like a kinda like a dynamic of conflict in it. It's just like everyone can be happy, and that's good.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Before doing this research and listening to the song over the years, I would often think that it reminds me of the Smiths. Like they made their most unabashedly pop song ever, and Morrissey went full sex positive. The Marr co-write and his distinctive guitar playing on the record now make that connection make perfect sense. Bragg fears no breach of professionalism when he puts the boot into Morrissey in the Material World Q&A. The enemy asks the question, Morrissey's solo career, what went wrong? Bragg replies, too many synthesizers. uh, there was always a menace to the Smiths, a lot of it generated by Morrissey. That's not there now. He just became too much of a parody. Perhaps he became too aware of what he should be in other people's eyes. So Bragg is kind of elevating himself there because he's stepping outside of what is expected of him. Quantic describes Bragg's previous album, 1988's Workers' Playtime, as no fun, a glum thing, weighed down by love and politics with precious few jollies.
In stark contrast to its title.
Exactly. Whereas on sexuality, Bragg sounds infectiously ebullient, and he is unafraid of selling it. In the interview, he claims that he now would rather make records like Sexuality than have a weekly column in the Socialist Worker. Who wouldn't?
Yeah, I mean, like, you'll hear no argument from me.
Yeah. And in a slightly kind of hypocritical sense, because I want to shock you here, there are dance remixes of this track on the CD single.
Damn you, Boland.
Yeah, exactly. The enemy asks simply, those dance mixes of Sexuality, why? Bragg replies, it's not the sort of thing people expect Billy Bragg to do. And there's always been a dance element to my music. So we're going to segue into Catalog Corner here. On the CD single and 12-inch release of the song, there are two remixes. A Manchester remix, which is remixed by Oasis producer Owen Morris, and a London remix. These have been scrubbed from existence. They are obviously not on DSPs, and only the London remix is on YouTube, which unfortunately is borderline unlistenable, as it seems to have been recorded using someone's phone. To the person who uploaded this video, I would say, hey, idiot, your turntable and amp have at least an AV out, so you can go RCA to USB into your computer, and from there, a simple piece of free software will mean that listeners can enjoy what no doubt are loveless, uninspired remixes for years to come. Now, I have ordered the CD single from Discogs of Sexuality.
How much did it cost you? I'm going 79p plus £4 postage and packaging.
It was £1.50 plus £4
Okay.
postage and packaging. When it arrives, I'll update you and our listeners on their quality. I have high hopes actually for the Manchester remix.
We should rip them and upload them to the Analog Slop YouTube channel. Like, get some more utility out of it.
That's right. I mean, from what little I heard of the London remix, it sounded awful. So
I love the idea of the Owen Morris mix, just like multi-tracking all of the acoustic guitars.
yeah, I seriously, if there's like a baggy version of this track that is like 6 minutes long, I am all in. As long as it keeps all the guitars. Yeah, I'm really got my fingers crossed that this is some lost classic.
All the guitars and a funky drummer loop.
Yeah.
Good to go.
Honestly, that sounds great. But of course, I don't think Bragg initially set out to have an out-and-out crossover hit with this track. There's a demo of the song on the expanded version of the album that features Bragg and Ma, and the song is stripped back, way less poppy, but the sentiment is intact. This is a Bragg song first and a pop song second. It's just that in its completed form, it sells the second part incredibly hard. Right, Graham, do you want to tell me about your relationship with Billy Bragg's sexuality?
Troubled is the answer.
Violated.
Well, yes, in a way. So this song indirectly led to some tough school times for me.
Wow.
Um,
Is this going to be a downer? Fuck.
no, it's not. It's not going to be a downer. Trust me, it's ludicrous. um, so I didn't hear this song at the time, or at least I wasn't aware of it. What I did hear instead was the I think it was like late night Channel 4 debut of Phil Jupitus in kind of like proto stand-up mode, and Billy Bragg changing the lyrics to bestiality.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, making it a song about having sex with animals.
I see where this is going.
That's all very funny, like, you know, and kind of probably like post-pub student like knockabout humor in 1991. However, unfortunately, my surname is of course Best. Um, when this version of the song kind of like broke out beyond the student bubble and became more widely known, it was sung at me many times,
Oh, God.
much to my irritation. So I didn't find out about the original version, or even that there was an original version called Sexuality, probably until like, you know, like the late 90s, maybe even early 2000s.
Wow.
And when I did, I was like, this song's pretty great. I enjoy this song. But yeah, it amuses me that I had such a wrong-faced introduction to it.
Do you know what? I have a closer where I kind of had written some very earnest notes about how much I love this song and what a what an what an earnest plea for tolerance, equality, and the rejection of prejudice it is, and how much pleasure it's given to me over the years. But in the after that anecdote, that just makes me sound like a complete arsehole. It's just like, I'm just re-traumatizing you for the past 30 minutes, bringing up a painful childhood memory.
In all fairness, with the distance of time, fair play to the bullies who picked up on that. That is pretty funny.
Join us next week for part 2 of our 2-part look at the Enemy and Melody Maker from the 14th of September 1991. We'll be looking at PM Dawn and Leatherface.
In the meantime, you can find us on the socials and most of the usual places. That's Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, all under the Analog Slop name. That's all one word and spelt ANALOGUESLOP. However, if you prefer your podcasts to involve static pictures, we are also on YouTube. That channel is youtube.com/ANALOGUE Slop. And finally, if you want to send us an email, we're reachable predictably on analogslop@gmail.com.